and just getting back to basics and the simplicity of birth, really, in its natural form, being undisturbed. And then there's space for it to be really this transcendent, life-changing, positive experience for any woman, and really help that woman to step into a place of being their most clear vision of themselves and have that confidence to be authoritative and leading in their mother role and strong and connected. I mean, I think there's a real deep connection to spirit through all of this as well, and also through the connection sessions working with a pregnant woman. It is about honouring that rite of passage.
This is a place where I would like to explore body connection, empowerment, and major rites of passages, really, which have become either so invisible and disregarded or medicalized and unmarked in our modern Western world. So I'm Stephanie Wechowski. I'm a herbalist, artist, and the mother of a 7-year-old daughter. And at the same time, I'm heading fast into the rite of passage of menopause. We are starting this podcast series with an exploration of the experience of birth and its physiology, that is actually birthing a child into this world from your womb, as it is the start of our embodiment here on earth, and also becoming a mother during our lifetimes is such a major shift. But I'm sure all this will organically evolve, or at least I'm hoping that it will, into many, many different subjects around all the important rites of passages in our lives and our place, power, and potential in this world. And ultimately, of course, it will feature detours into all of my interests. So today I'm talking to Gauri, who is a freebirthing doula and also runs a birth story circle here in Frome, where I live, in the West Country of the UK. She has a psychology and trauma-focused healing background, and she is a friend and part of my immediate community here. I'm really interested in this subject, especially from a body autonomy point of view, and trusting the body's innate design and knowledge of this positive feedback loop. That is how the birthing process is explained from a scientific perspective, or we could call it miracle, really, which can be so beautiful and ecstatic, but at the same time is also so violent and lets us skirt very viscerally on the line between life and death, and thus can also be very traumatic. I myself chose to have a home birth, which was a very positive experience, but it was still attended by 2 NHS midwives. So I would really like to explore how this is different to a full free birthing experience. So welcome, Gauri.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to have you here. I'm quite excited, actually. You're my first podcast conversation experience. So I'm a little bit nervous, but also very, excited. So
great. Me too. Me too. My first podcast experience as well. And I'm really excited to be here. Really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me.
So I tried giving a little introduction to you and what you do with the Yoni Tree in the intro, but I think it would be really great if you could talk in your own words about your background and your journey to what you're doing now for us.
Sure. It's hard to know how far back to go, but I guess I have a background in therapy in general. I studied psychology at university, and I did work within the NHS for some time, and had quite a difficult experience really with the NHS in general, within the setting of just kind of a lot of hierarchy and management, and not that much front line of really working with the patients I was working with in a mental health setting, a high secure mental health setting. And then I left that, and I guess I just got swooped into quite a deep spiritual journey of self-discovery and really connecting with my own inner sense of freedom, working through quite a lot of my own stuff, and found a deep connection to meditation and yoga. Went traveling, went away, spent a year in Thailand and in India, did some really month-long deep retreats in this amazing Buddhist temple in Chiang Mai. And I kind of came to this conclusion that, therapy is or meditation is therapy. And this kind of self-directive reflection and just so much learning came from just going inside and then just feeling such incredible joy and love and appreciation of nature, just that I just had never experienced it before, anything like that. And it really changed me that time away. And I also connected with Tantra. I found this school in Thailand where the yoga, Tantric yoga practice was so much about energy and connecting with the chakras and really feeling the energy inside, moving as you're in a posture, in a asana, as well as working with pranayama and various other techniques. And then after this trip, and I came back to England, and I lived in Bristol for a while and was practicing so much yoga and meditation and kind of trying to live outside of society somehow. And I didn't want to get in, all these ideas about what it meant to be in the rat race. And then I just realized that I needed to do more training and go back to the school in Koh Phangan in Thailand, called Agama Yoga. And I did. So then I spent a year working and building up the finances that I needed to do that. And then I went back there and I lived there in this tantric community for a year. I did the TTC there, like a teacher training course, and taught within the community and trained in tantric massage, essentially while I was in Thailand in Agama. And I was receiving yoni massage frequently. And this was something that had been profound for me, to ignite deeper pleasure in my body and really access a deeper state of oneness.
So, dear listeners, I'm intercepting here because Gauri and I went into quite a tangent at this point, talking about tantric yoni massage, female anatomy, and how little women actually explore their own body. Pleasure, the body as a vehicle for spiritual experience, a cervix serpent, self-pleasure, and the armoring toy that I have recently purchased and used, and body sovereignty as well. I am super keen to explore these topics a lot more in the future. And Gauri and I will talk more about it in a dedicated podcast, so watch out for that. But now I'm bringing the conversation back to birth and free birthing. I know you have birthed 2 children, and I'm wondering how your experience was with that, and maybe also how I'm not quite sure if you were already on the free birthing path before you had your children, or if that's something that came a little bit afterwards, but it would be really interesting to hear, with obviously all your background that has informed this as well.
Yeah, sure. So I wasn't aware of free birth necessarily until I got pregnant, and I instinctively felt that I didn't want to have any medical interference in my process with birth. And I had always been interested in birth, but then I'd always had this, and I was aware of doulas, but I just knew that I wanted to experience birth for myself before I kind of actually went into working within that realm. But at this point, like for a couple of years, I'd been doing then my tantric therapy, working with women and with men around kind of sexual release in some ways, and combining the body work with a lot of process work. And I'd done more training in that side of things as well, just to kind of say about that. And I had this very strong instinct, and I'd been reading books, and Ina May Gaskin, for one, had informed me basically of a lot of in relation to not needing to have any medical interference. And definitely I was afraid of medical intervention. So I committed to having a free birth. I only knew one other woman who had, and it felt lonely, and I didn't feel like I could talk about it much. And yet I'm this kind of very quite outspoken person, so I still spoke about it, and then I would end up feeling exposed and vulnerable and challenged by what I would get back. Even kind of some of my most alternative friends who hadn't had children yet, but would kind of say some kind of story about how some women they knew that wouldn't go to the hospital when she needed to, and then it would cause all these problems. And, just this kind of thing. I was challenged by these sort of negative birth stories. But I connected with the Free Birth Society, and I listened to these podcasts, and it just filled me with inspiration and confidence. And that's all I did, though. They have amazing courses, and I recommend Free Birth Society because I've trained now with them extensively. But at the time, that's as far as I took my education, really. And I had an incredible birth experience, and I had a lot of support from the women around me in my community, just because they loved me. And I didn't necessarily share that much about my intentions to free birth. I just felt like I knew it. And my partner wasn't head over heels about it. He struggled with it. So we did have this friend who had free birthed. She was actually training to be a midwife at that time, and was just in her first year. And she agreed to support us, but a bit on the down low, because she wasn't supposed to be doing anything like that. So she was there as our friend, and that is all that she was. And actually, in retrospect, I feel like her being there wasn't actually the right thing for me, but she was there to support my partner, and that's what he needed at that time. And I just had such an incredible birth experience, and not in any moment did I think, I need to phone a midwife or have anyone else there, particularly a stranger. Just the thought of any energy like that coming in was just a definite no. And I birthed in our bedroom, it felt like this deep dark nest, and I had this wonderful altar and birth art all up on the wall, and I was deeply connected with my body, and I felt like there was a massive purging, and it reminded me of an ayahuasca ceremony, honestly. And I really did. I did throw up a bit, but it was like this energetic purging and roaring, and the energy that was moving through me was unbelievable. And I remember being very connected to the earth and feeling a lot like my hands on the ground, and like this pushing down on the ground, like I was trying to allow space in my body as this intensity was, is intense. And yeah, so my friend only came for not the whole thing, just a few hours. And the whole experience was about 7 hours long for the birth itself. And so my partner and I had been doing these practices to honor the rite of passage. So, I'd been doing this amazing practice, which is something that I offer now for my women that I work with, that really helps to connect with the body and everything. So I'd been doing that for 3 weeks previous. And then on the day that it ended was actually that night that I went into birthing, that the next morning. And it was on the winter solstice, on a full moon. And my baby was actually due to be born on, the due date, which I don't really agree with so much anymore, but was actually Christmas Day. So it was 3 days early. And my partner had been doing his own little honouring of the rite of passage by doing an all-night walk from Frome to Stonehenge on the night of the solstice. So yeah, he'd been out doing his walk, and it was 5 a.m. in the morning when my waters started to seep, and yeah, he came back and we had a bit of rest. And then, yeah, the full-on birthing time began more when it got dark again. And then Cedar was born that evening around 10 p.m. And I like that moment that he was born, there was just such a rush of love and bliss, and it was just the most incredible feeling. And I stayed in that space for a couple of hours, and it really just was incredible. Really, really incredible. And then from there, I feel like there was a capping of my experience, because even though I felt fine and everything was fine, I hadn't birthed the placenta, and it had been about 3 hours. And even though I knew I wanted a free birth, I had still kept within the, because I didn't want to have any alarm bells going. I'd still been connecting with the midwives, and yeah, so I still had some fear. I feel like I was still in that world, and it's so based on fear. And I had words from the midwife about the placenta, and I hadn't educated myself at that point about the placenta being fine to take as long as it needs to take. And so, yeah, also the friend that was supporting us was starting to get worried about that, and that felt like, and I felt that. So anyway, in the end, we did have some intervention, and a midwife did come, and I had Syntocin on, which drastically changed how I felt. So I had that real experience of noticing what a synthetic hormone does to the natural release of the hormones, which I was so high off and experiencing in such incredible kind of intensity. And it was just like wiped, and I was just like drained and lifeless, and it was completely different. But we still stayed in our space and everything. Placenta birthed, and there was no problems. And so that was my first experience of birth, and then quite quickly went into having another child, and didn't necessarily work through what I feel I probably needed to work through at that time now in retrospect, and with all the kind of depth of learning I've done now around kind of being able to reflect on birth experiences and get all the lessons from them. There was a lot there that I hadn't done in relation to my first child's birth. And I found the pregnancy harder. I was tired, and my body ached, and I had a 18 months baby going on to 2 years, and I still wanted to free birth, but also in this time I'd done a doula training, and I feel like I had somehow kind of, because I'd doulaed a couple of women, a couple of families, so I'd been then again in with the system in a way, because at that point I wasn't up for being a free birth doula. I didn't know how to do that. I had no idea how to do that, even though I knew I wanted to do that.
So what kind of doula training did you do at the time?
It was something called Continuum Doulaing, which is about giving a deeper experience of support, which kind of I knew did then combine in with my kind of therapeutic holding, because it's about giving more of a therapeutic holding before and after the birth, which is really important, and something that I do, how I work now is definitely that. But it was also what was available with having a young child as well. And I did really respect the woman who was doing the training, and I did get something out of that training for sure. But I still didn't feel like it was totally in alignment, because there wasn't any mention of free birth within that. There wasn't really. It was so alongside the system, and this is the role of a doula. It is alongside the system, and actually a doula doesn't have any power around speaking up or speaking into the space of a birth, really. Other, they are emotional support for the woman, and which is amazing and valid and necessary. But yeah, it wasn't for me really this way. But I had done it, and I had worked then with a couple families, which had been beautiful, but I'd still found a contraction when there was a midwife that was disturbing, actually, the natural flow. Or even if it wasn't during the birthing time, like the afterwards, like with the syntocinon injection, which is just protocol. It's just the normal thing to do, instead of giving the placenta the time it needs, and the gratitude it needs, also the honouring of what it's been doing for those whole 9 months, of nurturing that baby and that mother, and that like the connection, like what that really means. And it's just lost completely in this medicalization of birth, really. So yeah, even though I knew that I wanted to free birth again with my second, I didn't really do much. I just kind of naively thought, of course I'm going to do that. Like, there's no question. So I didn't really have much space or time. I didn't create much space or time to educate myself further on birth, really, like the true physiology of birth. I kind of knew. I did know, but then all the other variations of normal, or what to do with the unexpected, and, like actually having an education behind me and a certain wisdom around it was lacking. So then when I had also done the same rite of passage practice and the various things to connect to my body. And I did feel connected to my body and connected to my baby. But I also felt that I was more in a distracted place than I had been in my previous pregnancy. And I think just the general distraction culture I had brought into a bit more, also with the excuse of having a young child and not really having the self-care in place that was necessary to really honour the rite of passage of pregnancy. There needs to be that, I believe.
And it is tricky. It is tricky with a young child and how we are set up, if we are set up.
It's true, yeah. And my partner works is out at work basically 8 till 6 every day. And these are certain things that we're looking at that we know we want to change. But it was, that was the reality. And so when it got to 41 weeks, and I just assumed that everything was going to be the same as with my firstborn, and I would probably be a bit early, and, And of course, having then an older child, there's another dynamic of, I wanted him to be there, but my partner wasn't okay with being in charge of me and the baby, in knowing that I wanted to free birth, and still that not really feeling that comfortable with him. So many dynamics to it. But we had sorted a friend who was going to be looking after the older one. And anyway, that was another piece to it, to not really be able to fully surrender to what is this birth going to be, because there's still the responsibility of the older one too, and how is that going to fit? Anyway, so I was still connected to the medical system in the same way I was with the first. I was still having prenatals and ultrasounds, which I definitely would not do if I have a third opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so you're still fed into the system, and you're still fed into the kind of fear-mongering on some level. So when I had a midwife appointment at 41 weeks and she thought the baby was breech, and I was kind of told I needed to go for an ultrasound, it was like, whoa, okay. So I was like, I'd refused an ultrasound previous to that when there had been a question of breech, because I had been really sure that he was head down. And I was also very open and susceptible and influential. Obviously, 41 weeks, I'm totally in the liminal space of the ending of pregnancy. And I just didn't feel that and I was like, oh yeah, well, I suppose I should know if he's breech. So I went and I found out he was breech, and it was a really, really difficult thing to know. And I didn't, and I cried, and I went sort of fed into this, oh, I need to try and turn him. And I was just in that lost fear, fuck kind of place, you know, at that moment and that time where I was. And so it escalated from that place that I mean, didn't actually occur to me then that I could still free birth my breech baby. Now, with what I know now, I totally know I could have free birthed my breech baby, no problem. Anyway, so it took me a week to process the fact it was breech, and I was told that my options are to have a cesarean or to vaginally birth my baby spontaneously. Obviously, I was going to go for the vaginally birth my baby, but I was obviously told that had to be spontaneous. They wouldn't induce a breech baby, and I wouldn't have wanted that anyway. I was confident that I would go into labour, but I think I was ready to birth a lot earlier, or that my baby was ready to birth earlier, but because of all of this process that I'd been kind of dived into with him being breech and all the fear there, and I wasn't really in my body for that week, I feel like. And it was approaching the 42-week mark, and yeah. But I did. I also had some help with some herbs, or at least I had them there ready from a friend who's a herbalist, and I was thinking about doing kind of my own natural induction to get things started. But I watched a load of breech vaginal birth deliveries just on YouTube, and something clicked in me, and I was like, yeah, I can do this. There's no problem really. But still, I wasn't ready to actually step into free birthing a breech, and that, you know, like that still was this next level. I just didn't have enough time to get ready for that, and still being in this very liminal, open, influenced place, I think, at that time. So anyway, I went into labour spontaneously. We'd had a beautiful, relaxed day of just me and my partner and my son, been for a walk, and, you know, I connected again with just, yeah, you know, that inner knowing that I could birth my baby, there's no problem here, but we were going to go to the hospital, and wow, this was going to be a new experience. And I was like, warrior, I'm going to do this. I'm still just going to have my natural birth without any interference in the hospital. And this is going to be really good for my doulaing, you know, and this kind of like, and it was on some level. And the birth itself was super quick. And
so did you birth breech?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I had a vaginal breech birth in the hospital. My labour was only about 3 hours long. So I woke in the night and sensations just ramped up super quick. But I didn't know how close I was, because the sensations were definitely less intense, and I was working with them in a different way while I was still at home. Maybe it was because my son was present too, and I needed to settle him, and I needed to settle him in with my friend who'd come to look after him, who he knew really well, and, you know, that was fine. But so I was having these really like strong sensations of the contractions very close together, but I was able to just close my eyes and be with them in such a different way to this like overly dramatic roaring and like taken into some kind of, yeah, dark purging like place from the first birth, which I mean was amazing and absolutely amazing in its own right. But with this experience, I definitely realized that I could work with the sensations in a different way. at least at this point while I was still at home. But then as soon as I was out in the night and we got into the van and going to the hospital, and so my partner put a mattress in the back of the van, and I was just like, then I was like, Wild Woman was out, and I could be totally in all of that drama again. So I was, and I think I transitioned actually as well through this time in the van, and I did throw up at one point, and we had a bucket and stuff, so it was fine. And actually another whole element of this, which I didn't know at the time, was that the van was about to run out of diesel, and literally my partner was like coasting along, like trying to like keep, like make sure we got to the hospital. It's like something out of a soap or something, but I didn't know at the time. But yeah, and had a moment of stillness when we arrived at the hospital, and my partner went in because he tried to help me in, and my legs just collapsed and I was not going to be walking anywhere. I was so close to birthing at that point, but I still didn't really realize it. And I just had this really strong need to go to the toilet, to do a big poo. And this was like the beginning of the dignity just gone, of like, of my dignity being respected by the medical staff, because they came out with the wheelchair, and I was like, just take me to the toilet. And I just need to go to the toilet first off. And they were like, no, it's your baby. It's just your baby. And there was just this massive weird like panic energy that they just wouldn't listen to me. And I wasn't having the energy to talk anyway. It was so I wasn't allowed to go to the toilet. I was taken to the ward, and I was like, you know, like managing to keep in my bubble, my arms over my head. Really, really strong connection with my partner of just like holding that space. And literally within 20 minutes, he was emerging, and I had told them I didn't want to be monitored, but they'd strapped me up because they was like, but we think there's something wrong, so we need to check and all of this. It was totally unnecessary because he was being born. It was, you know, but I wasn't in control then, like of what was happening to me, and that was really clear. But I'd kept in my bubble, and my baby was emerging, and I was so present in my body. And it was the same with my firstborn as well. The depth of feeling and presence inside my body as baby was moving down the birth canal and crowning. And so this time it was bum first. And I could really feel it. I could just feel it. I could feel every piece of the bum coming, the feet plopping down, and the way that he twisted, and then his head came, and it was incredible, the sensations of it. And I'd kept in our bubble, and we'd done it without anyone touching him or me. But as soon as then he came down, and I got him up onto my chest, and straight away there was like 2 women with towels trying to rub him down. And I was just like, so immediately I was in protection mode. Get off, get away from me. It was fierce, that feeling that I had. And so I was out of my beautiful hormonal matrix. I didn't feel the bliss, the joy, the intense endorphins that are very natural to that moment when you're first holding your baby. It was totally different, and a really different experience. And so then I was in a cascade of intervention, really, because they were there. That in itself is a massive disturbance, the environment, everything about it. And obviously I just felt this protection and fear. So that took over my hormonal release that was necessary then to birth my placenta within this tiny hour that they allow you. Also, I was bleeding, and I was still feeling fine, but because, you know, there was so many pieces, they was putting so much pressure on me to have to, go and have this, my placenta manually removed, basically. So that's what happened, because there wasn't any space for me to say no to that. And luckily my baby was there next to me the whole time, and, you know, I don't think it brought any harm to him. But it was like he'd just latched on to my breast, which was such a big deal, because I haven't mentioned that much about it, but my firstborn, Cedar, he didn't latch on for 7 weeks after he was born, and I pumped and I expressed milk for him until he was able to latch on. And so this like moment of my baby latching on in this first hour of being born, it meant so much to me. And they were telling me I had to take him off, and we had to go through to I had to do this. And there was actually some young boy with another bed, literally just pulled up next to me, like looking at me like, come on then, like someone I'd never seen before, there was, and it was like, I remember being like, who are you to so many people in this time. Anyway, so it was massively exposing, massively vulnerable. I weeped through it, and then my body was shaking. I didn't respond well to the anesthetic. It was severe. It was really severe. And it took me a year really to recognize how traumatic it had been, because I think you just have to put it aside when you're mothering a newborn and another toddler as well. And, that we had a beautiful year actually in that year before I opened it up again and worked through it. And it took me, a lot of holding of wonderful women in my life and people I also have trained with to do with the Radical Birthkeeper School. So that's what I did. That's what I found. And through that education and that holding and that sisterhood, I worked through this trauma and learned how to be a birthkeeper, which is what I am now, and totally deep dived into everything physiological birth can be, and learned so much from these amazing teachers who have been supporting free birth for like over 20 years each. And just filled myself up with wisdom and kind of deep experience, really deep, again, awakening in so many ways of what it means to really support birth and what it means to, actually stand up and say, no, it's not okay that so many women are being abused in this medical system now. And it's so normal, and so many women having trauma from what should be this incredible rite of passage into becoming the absolute authority, the absolute leader in their life and in their mothering journey with their babies and their children. And instead it's like robbing them, and I get where it's come from, and it is from patriarchy and oppression. And it's so clear just when you learn about the history of birth. And yet no woman is ever told, in our, normal NHS system of their options, actually their options.
And women are also often not told, like either by their own mothers or by mothers around them, and neither by the medical system or society of what is conducive to birthing, what is not, how to listen to their body and not be afraid of certain things. Actually, quite often the opposite is being promoted. I mean, I learned about what supports the actual physiology of the birthing process, things like low lighting, no talking when in labor, and the importance of absolutely no stress because of adrenaline blocking oxytocin. When I did the Paramana Doula course with Michelle Audon and Liliana Lamas in London, and I reckon that was the reason that my home birth experience was a positive one. I would really, really like to have a look at your journey of going through the trauma and then just talking about what you're doing now. That would be really great.
Sure. Yeah. So I was feeling called to, come back to my work, I suppose, since having Ren, my second child, and all this, knowing that it wasn't feeling good, my experience, but I hadn't really worked through it. I tried a bit, but I hadn't had the right holding. So it's through the Radical Birthkeeper School, which is a course, a deep dive, a 3-month intensive program that's run by the Free Birth Society and written by Yolanda Norris Clark, who works with Emily, who is the Free Birth Society. They've created this course, and part of the course is about recognizing how to support women to kind of do birth story debriefing, and integration and processing, and holding a space to unravel birth experiences, to feel everything, to go into the emotional kind of landscape of it and feel everything to completion, kind of, and be held in that. And I did that with a couple of my peers who I was learning with through the process of learning how to do this for other women. And yeah, there was just suddenly, it's a sort of a certain reflection that came that then meant I could see the medicine in it, and I could really learn the lessons, and I could recognize that it's like a snapshot of my consciousness in that moment or something. And that's where I was in my life at that time. When it comes to both birth experiences, actually, there's a lot to take about where did I not fully stand in my 100% responsibility, and where was I feeding into something that wasn't serving me, or what, this sort of thing. And that it was incredible. And I had a couple of weeks or more maybe where I was just a mess, and I felt so vulnerable in every place. And, I couldn't really, I went into that trauma. I went there and I let myself experience that in a way. And then it cleared. It kind of just moved, and I found myself thinking about it differently, being able to speak about my experience differently, and in not having the same charge anymore. And I also was still experiencing some pain in my body. Well, uncomfortability in my body, and as my cycle came back when I was ovulating. So this actual experience had created some trauma physically in my body, in my womb and my yoni, and I was experiencing some discomfort. And I had a kind of so there's another woman who works doing similar work to me in the kind of tantric therapy realm, called Kalindi Jordan, and I had a session with her, which also was this kind of yoni holding, this kind of womb holding, which allowed me to energetically connect in with my placenta and honor that organ and my body in a way that I had not been able to do. So there's various levels of that too, in a sense of emotional processing as well. And I still sometimes get certain sensations in my body which I know are related to that experience, and I just give them love. I just give them love and honor it, really. Honor that my body went through that, and honor all the lessons that have come through from that experience too. Yeah. And that's what I do for women now as well. That's what part of what I offer is birth story integration and processing in one-to-one sessions, as well as a free group women's circle that I hold monthly, where women can kind of begin to go there in a group setting as well, and be held by other women. And we can all then receive the medicine and the magic from that birth experience, because we can all go through that with the women, as they're sharing. It's always so relatable. There's so many women that have been through similar things, and that deeper connection of sisterhood that comes with sharing in a circle, can be really part of the integration and being seen in our light and in our vulnerability. Yeah. And the kind of yoni therapy is also something I offer one-to-one sessions of kind of talking everything through, and this kind of emotional holding of feeling everything to completion, and at the same time holding that space for the body to release as well, delicately in whatever way is right for that woman, really. Because a lot of energy, a lot of trauma can be stored in the yoni and in the cervix, and having this kind of holding space for very delicate touch and very delicate energetic connection can really allow for these deeper emotional releases to occur as well, or even deeper than the emotional release, almost like on a unconscious level of the way the body, the interweb of the body, how it can hold so much. And it can just be like a spontaneous like shake, and something's moved and it changes how that woman can experience her yoni, her body. You know, whether it comes down to there's pain and uncomfortability being experienced in just daily life, or during sex, or during ovulation or menstruation. Or just not feeling pleasure, numbness, dissociation. These are all kind of symptoms of there being stuck trauma. And absolutely helping women to birth their babies, in a sense of just supporting them to be their own authority and their own leader, and then whatever process work might be needed in preparation for that, unraveling all the socialization and cultural kind of myths and intense fear that surrounds birth in our kind of culture. So, I mean, there's a lot to unravel when you're birth keeping for women that want to birth outside of the medical system, for sure. But I think there's definitely, there's a commitment that comes when women are choosing that. There's a deep knowing. It comes from something way beyond just your day to day, that feeling, I think. And whether it's connecting to, our ancestors and something about our deep rite as women to experience this, really how nature intended as a real rite of passage, and really acknowledging that and all of ourselves, so that we can feel and be intuitively connected to our baby, and know that is the way to know how to make any choice, or how to work with ourselves to do something that we're meant to do, to allow our bodies just to do what they're supposed to do, and not get too involved in that, and actually definitely not allow anyone else to disturb that process. And I mean, there's so much that can be said about that. But yes, I offer a service of birth keeping and support through that.
So how does that look like? For example, if I would be a woman now and I would be pregnant, how would you support me through this rites of passage?
Yeah, we'd have there'd be an initial interview, and there would be a real, a delicate process of connection, really, of really recognizing whether we were in, in alignment, and if that felt like a full body yes from both sides, then great. We would talk about how that woman sees her support as well. So there is I would offer connection sessions, or you could call authentic prenatal sessions, where, and we might talk about what kind of care that woman would like in her authentic prenatals, as in, does she want any kind of measuring or this kind of thing, or is she just really wanting space to be held for emotional processing? I mean, generally it's also an education, and I would be talking about various topics through the connection sessions related to unpacking kind of the standard prenatal care and understanding the deep, true physiology of birth, and what that means, the psychoenergetics of birth as well, and a deep emotional holding, working through fear, understanding how to work with fear, understanding how to work with pain. I've also, since finishing the Radical Birthkeeper School, continued my education with Yolanda, one of the founders of it, by doing this course called Portal, which is all about ecstatic, blissful birth. So this is a whole other extension now. And actually the woman I'm working with right now, who I'm supporting, because I'm on call actually right now, she's done this course too. And so this is going to be a really interesting, very excited for this birth experience and supporting her. And really it's just about, it's holding in a different way. And so I would be present, and I'm on call for basically from like 35 weeks, because it can happen at any time. And I had a surprise 37 weeks actually, just a couple months ago. And it's just about the difference about or what, like birth keeping. It's holding a space. It's holding an energetic space in complete trust and clarity, and making sure that any of your own stuff is left at the door for sure. Like, and if you notice that you're having any kind of emotional process coming in, this is when you go and you work through that away from the birthing woman, because there's really an understanding that any energetic or emotional energy is felt by that woman. And also, even if you notice the partner or anyone else who's supporting as well, even on the outskirts, having something going on or having any kind of fear, you know, you are there to help to direct those people within that. So it's like you're an authority of birth, but you're not the authority of this birth experience. Absolutely not. The mother is the sole authority. And so you are there to reflect back to her if she needs to work through something during that birthing time. You're there, and you support that woman as well. And if she was to decide to transfer because she feels that something's wrong, or she just ends up being concerned and feeling like that's what the right path is for her, then I would absolutely support her in that and continue to support her within a hospital environment if that's what she decided she wanted to do. And there might be some talking through of that before that happened. I know that we know that it's not good to talk during the birth process, but there are sometimes moments where there can be fear coming up. And there does need to be okay, so what would happen if we did that? And just a reflection of, so that woman can work through what her idea might be of what she thinks she might receive from this or from that. And that can be part of the process as well during the pregnancy, recognizing if there's that kind of sudden inclination of wanting some medical assistance, or like what would, like breaking it all down, because actually in essence when you do break it down you realize, what are you actually gaining from that, and is all of it worth that? And it's a lot of breaking down everything and just getting back to basics and the simplicity of birth, really in its natural form, being undisturbed. And then there's space for it to be really this transcendent, life-changing, positive experience for any woman, and really help that woman to step into a place of being their most clear vision of themselves, and have that confidence to be authoritative and leading in their mother role, and strong and connected. I mean, I think there's a real deep connection to spirit through all of this as well, and also through the connection sessions working with a pregnant woman. It is about honouring that rite of passage. There's a particular practice that I share and will hold the woman in, like a practice that she does every day, which is a combination of different things to help her connect with her body and her baby, and feel alive and in her joy and in her gratitude, which really helps to get her in that place.
And being connected to our body already, like very strongly, and having a big trust in the physiology and what goes on in the birth, like, you know, that our bodies are made. There are positive feedback loops that are happening with certain hormones being released at certain times of the birthing process, and that our bodies are made for that. And trusting that, and like really working on that connection before birth, I think already changes the possibility for having a good birth, shall I just say. I don't want to put too much onto it with like blissful or this or that, but and an empowered birth in that kind of way, which I think is very, very important. Yeah. And are you there postnatally then? Just to come.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. It can be different. So the amount of support can be different for every woman, and it can depend what they feel they need in that time. But yes, it would be already arranged, whether I visit a couple times or not, helping with breastfeeding kind of support and that sort of thing as well. And there's a strong advocacy for rest in that time, and so I would maybe set up a meal train for the family, even like sister circles, women to go in and really, support that woman in that time. And that would all have been spoken about. The woman would have had a mother blessing that I may or may not have been part of, but, it's something that often just sisters for deep friends want to organise. And I've been to so many mother blessings now that are just always so moving, and just knowing that this is such a big part for women to take this step into making these choices, having that support, having that reverence and honour in their community by the women that are really in their lives, and feeling this. I mean, even for myself, especially with my first experience, I really felt this energetic circle of women around me, and the fact they'd all given me something to hold that was on my altar, or they'd written me a poem, or they'd sung me a song, or they'd touched my body in a certain way with their support. It felt like then the branches that go out and the roots that grow down from these women and their ancestors and this like, and the birthing mother really being in the center, and it's like it's such a receiving. It opens the heart in a certain way as well. And it just brings such knowing. It's like the body's innate wisdom is activated in a certain way. It's really profound what can come. And just to say, it's also, so even women who are birthing within the medical sphere still, having this kind of deeper information can be quite incredible to help with decision making and boundaries and the kind of process of going through the medical system, through the birthing kind of arena as well. And so I do offer a birth education circle, which is a 7-week course where I'm delving into these various topics, the history of birth and where we've come from, and also looking into the prenatal care, like the rituals within the NHS and how we can see through a lot of the energy of becoming a patient and giving away our authority and not taking responsibility because we don't think we need to in some ways. And this is a cultural thing. It's massive, but yes, so there is that opportunity too, if it's just about wanting to learn about like wild pregnancy and free birth, but still not necessarily stepping into that place, it can still transform the whole honouring of the rite of passage and still transform the quality of the experience for that woman. So yeah.
How do you offer that, the course? Is that something you do in person, or do you do it online?
Yes, I'm doing it in person at the moment. Maybe I will do something similar online at some point, but I just love doing things in person, and particularly women's circles and this kind of like the depth that can be achieved. So I'm actually going to be starting one quite soon, or I'm just starting to put the message out there about the next one that I'll be doing, and it's a 7-week course, so it will be every week. I think I'm going to do a Saturday afternoon. And it is for women, but I'm actually going to invite partners as well, because that feels really important, actually. And we will be having some kind of self-connection practice within that as well, and some time for sharing and some information gathering, discussion each week. And then kind of like, obviously it's an opportunity to also meet other parents who are going to be birthing around the same time, and just unravel a lot of the things that we've been talking about as a set schedule for every week. And also be space to just share about it. And the actual intention as well is to kind of create space for those people. It's not just women, because obviously they're partners. It's a rite of passage for both parents, but to acknowledge that and create space for reflection on what we're feeling, what's happening, like, and how we might want to honor that more. Yeah, it's really I've found it really heartwarming to do this work as well. This kind of, and I feel like it's so strong, this energy in me of wanting to pass on this information, you know. And so if you feel called to join any of these things that I've been talking about, or want to get in touch with me to work with me personally, I have a website, theyonitree.com. I have an Instagram, the Yoni Tree, and yeah, my email is theyonitree@gmail.com. But yeah, I'm really open to hearing from anybody, just even if you want to share your story. I really love to be in touch. And I'm based here in Frome in Somerset, and I can do online one-to-ones as well. I have done a few of those sessions, but I do prefer to work one-to-one, especially if there's a body workout element to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
This has been just amazing.
So, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Gauri about free birthing, her birth experiences, and the possibilities we can explore around birthing. The next episode will be looking at the actual science and physiology of birth, and my guest will be Michelle Audon, who's the author of 16 books around childbirth, and I'm very, very excited about this. A list with links to all the people, books, and organizations mentioned in the podcast you will be able to find below, so you can explore the subjects further. If you found the podcast via one of the usual platforms like Apple or Spotify, then come and also visit my website at www.mothermouth.co.uk. Thank you so much for listening and being here. Bye for now.